Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to our friends at the Skillery for having us this morning in Stoke Studio. This is great. I'm totally honored to be speaking with you today. And while I'm truly no color expert, I do hope that I can offer some new ways for us to think about color and the language and memories that we attach to our color experiences. I'm going to approach what is a really universal, big, broad topic from a few different personal angles. First, I'm a teaching artist. Currently, I work mainly with elementary age students at Akiva School, which is a small private Jewish day school on the west side of town. As an art educator, my thinking and planning often begins with questions. What do I want a student to get out of this? How can I leave room for experimentation and still plug in some vocabulary? How can I meet my students where they are and honor their fears, questions, ideas, and experiences? Similarly, I'll approach this talk with some essential questions of my own. First, what kinds of associations and memories do we have with colors and why? Then, what language have we developed around color, both in naming it and describing it? And how can color become a touchstone, a hook, or an organizer to help us create meaning out of our daily lives and experiences? I'm also a maker. I've never been interested or particularly good at specializing or focusing deeply in one thing, so my practice is more notable for its variety of form and content. I have a background in graphic design and painting, though recently I get most excited about installation art and book and paper arts. My current biggest focus is a small business called Amaranthus Paper and Flora, which I recently launched with my mom, selling handcrafted crepe paper flowers. Yes. In this mode, I've done a lot of thinking about colors that mimic nature and colors that play well together. I'm also a normal person who just sees, uses, selects, and remembers colors in my everyday life, just like you. I'll take some time to talk about how we perceive color and attach language to it. I'm also a synesthete and a big nerd. This is where I'd like to begin. Chapter Green, Synesthesia. I was a junior in high school, and my best friend Erin and I were studying for a history test together, and we were really good at coming up with mnemonic devices to remember facts about various historical dates and figures. And in one of these study sessions, I remember suggesting that we could recall that a particular dude did a certain thing in a particular year because both the date and his name were green. The dude and the date escape me now. Clearly our studying totally paid off. But Aaron was like, what the heck? He has a red name. That won't work. So I'm not sure when I first realized that my letters and numbers each had specific colors. But I remember this moment being the first time finding another person who had colors. So fast forward to college, freshman year. My roommate Katie and I are hanging out in our dorm room, talking about life like you do in college, and somehow my colors came up. And Katie, who was a psychology major, diagnosed me with synesthesia. Some of my friends doubted that this was legit, and they were pretty sure that I was full of crap. So they tested me and recorded my color descriptions for every letter of the alphabet and numerals too. I can describe the hue and the shade of each color for each letter. For example, whereas C is a light lemony yellow, T is a more robust, kind of warmer daffodil yellow. So they pulled out this alphabet list with my color descriptions a few weeks later, and not only did I pass, I used the same words and language to try and describe each color. So most people have never heard of synesthesia. I, who actually had it, had never heard of synesthesia. But we all know anesthesia, meaning no sensation. So if we take the new prefix syn, Greek for union or together, we get synesthesia, which basically adds up to joined sensation. With a nod to our good friends at Wikipedia, here's a basic definition. Synesthesia is a neurological phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to automatic, involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. At one time thought to be as rare as 1 in 2,000 people, more recent research suggests that synesthesia could be much more common at closer to 1 in 200 people. Causes of synesthesia are still largely unknown, but some theories exist. So different areas of the brain are dedicated to specific functions, and synesthetes have increased crosstalk between different regions due to genetically driven overabundance of neural connections in the brain. Some scientists think that we are all born with neural connections that allow for synesthesia, but that most of us lose those connections as we grow, which my husband is fond of interpreting as my brain is underdeveloped. The good news is, unlike a century ago when synesthetes were dismissed as being either lunatics or simply making it up, our neurological phenomenon is now being taken more seriously in the scientific world. There are several kinds of cross-sensory forms of synesthesia, from number forms being perceived in sequence in space, to colored letters, tasted words, colored hearing, and even associating personalities with numbers and letters. I happen to experience 2 of the more common forms, including spatial sequence synesthesia, in which my alphabet, time, and calendar forms appear laid out in space in my head like a looping sidewalk, and I'm kind of positioned at different places on this sidewalk depending on the context. Then, as I've already mentioned, I also experience colored graphemes, i.e. letters and numbers. My colors are not ones that I picked or ones that I necessarily liked, but they are more like an instantaneous and involuntary but really strong association. So recently, for the first time ever, I actually tried to create a visual alphabet and number line with my colors. And it was harder than I expected. So other than being a cool party trick, what good is synesthesia? One thing that most synesthetes will say is that it helps us remember things. Typically, words take on the color of the first letter of the word. So if that history dude's name was Theodore Roosevelt, then for me, his last name would be a royal emerald green. But if the historical figure in question was Jefferson, then we're talking like a lighter, grassier, almost lime green. But if it were Adams, then we're getting into deeper forest green territory. Which brings me to a problem that I have with my awesome party trick. I have a lot of green letters. And those letters are common name letters. I often remember what color someone's name is before I recall their actual name, but I have an unfortunate habit of mixing up green names. So if you're Adam and I call you Ryan or Dave, please forgive me. Or if your name is Diana, please excuse me if I seem to be dead set on Rachel. But synesthesia can be helpful too, in its bizarre little way. I know that I remember information better if I have organized it by color, my colors. As a teacher, I'm always organizing things by grade, K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it helps me find things faster if I can make my first grade folders white, second grade gray, third grade yellow, fourth grade green, fifth grade red. Of course, it poses a minor challenge because kindergarten with a K should also be red. At the very least, I do try to do my odd numbers warm and even numbers cool because I kind of lucked out with that just happening. But office supply companies just aren't concerned with my synesthetic problems. No one makes divider tabs in the colors and orders that I need them. So it's a blessing and a curse. So who has synesthesia anyways? Some famous synesthetes include musicians Billy Joel, Tori Amos, Mary J. Blige, Kanye West, Eddie Van Halen, Stevie Wonder, Duke Ellington, actress Marilyn Monroe, artists David Hockney, Vasily Kandinsky, Vincent van Gogh, and physicist Richard Feynman. They were or are all synesthetes of one kind or another. Many of the musicians have music-to-color synesthesia in which sounds evoke colors for them. On your way in, while we were drinking our coffee this morning, you may have noticed my oh-so-official poll/test for grapheme color synesthesia. While a better test would be consistently repeating colors over time, like my friends did with me in college, I also think that the involuntary yet decisive nature of the condition is also a huge part of it. So I've asked you to respond to the following question. Is the letter N orange? Yes. If you strongly agree or strongly disagree with this, it could be a sign that you have synesthesia, especially if you disagree because you just know that N is supposed to be, say, purple. But if you're like, yeah, sure, orange sounds nice enough, or you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Then, sorry, you probably don't have synesthesia. But creating metaphors and connections across senses is something I think we can all relate to in some way. Researcher Lawrence Marks points out that, quote, much of poetic and even everyday language is filled with metaphors that describe one sensory mode in terms of another. For example, describing visual images in terms of sounds, as in loud colors, or sounds in terms of tactile sensations, as in soft music. Sometimes these metaphors have broad, seemingly universal appeal and sense to them, but oftentimes, whether we're synesthetes or not, we have really personal feelings and connections with particular colors. This brings me to chapter Red. It's personal. My favorite book happens to be a children's book, and I have loved this book my entire life. It's called Red is Best by Kathy Stinson. I don't love it because of some particular preference for the color red, but I adore it because of the main character's awesome reasons for liking red. For example, Kelly likes her red jacket the best because how can she be Red Riding Hood in her blue jacket? Duh. And she likes her red PJs better than her warmer yellow ones because the red ones keep the monsters away. I mean, how can you argue with that? And my personal favorite, like I care if there's not much red paint left, that's the stuff that puts singing in my head. And you don't mess with the voices in someone's head, y'all. So, in my opinion, this book is not about red. It's about the fantastic and special personal connections and feelings that we form around colors, or anything that we're really drawn to, for that matter. Red, for me, evokes a story about a very special person, my grandfather. He was the kind of man who could tease anyone with just the perfect amount of charm that you immediately fell in love with him. He had a fond practice of mocking my domestic skills, or shall we say lack thereof. And one day when I was in high school, a button fell off of his cardigan sweater. And using the reverse psychology that grown-ups are so adept at, he loudly made it known that he'd just have to wait until my mother had some time to sew it back on because clearly he knew that I couldn't do it. So, of course, I proceeded to take his sweater up to the laundry room where my mom's sewing supplies were. And instead of sewing back on the little gray button that had fallen off, I found the biggest, reddest button I could in her button box. I sewed that puppy on and couldn't wait to see his face when I gave it back to him. So, not one to be outdone, my grandfather put his sweater back on and buttoned it up with great pride. It was like Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had landed on my grandfather's belly button region, and the reindeer's nose was shining out of my grandfather's sweater. He loved it. I loved it. He wore that sweater with its ostentatious, mismatched red button to family reunions, Home Depot, and everywhere in between, faithfully until the day he died. Color is personal. Red is best. Chapter Teal, places and spaces, especially bathrooms. After college, I had the opportunity to work at the Ragdale Foundation, which is a really awesome artist community just outside Chicago. It's a residency program for artists and writers situated in this magical old arts and crafts estate on 50 acres of prairie. Architect Howard Van Doren Shaw originally built it as a summer home for his family in 1898. The trim and window boxes of the Ragdale house are painted in a teal color called, appropriately, Ragdale blue. This proprietary hue combines tints of robin's egg and patinaed copper. It's a signature color for the Ragdale Foundation, though I did just learn they're going through some rebranding and maybe using some new colors now. But it can also be found in various decorative and architectural elements throughout the estate. I already really loved all shades of teal, blue-green, aqua, and turquoise, but working at this place seemed to coalesce my experience of this color family into a forever association with Ragdale. I found that my wardrobe began including a lot more teal as well, and my boss was fond of joking that when shopping, anything Ragdale blue is free, like a free pass on my budget or credit card statement just for opting for the teal sweater or the teal scarf. I liked this thinking, and I can still hear her voice whispering to me when I'm shopping today. It's Ragdale blue, it's free, get it. Inside Ragdale, there is a bathroom in the converted barn house, which is where the administrative offices are located. And while bathrooms are probably the last thing you expected to hear about in a talk on color this morning, I need to take a moment to wax poetic about the color of this barn house bathroom. In a word, it is perfection. It's still in the teal-ish family of Ragdale blue, but it leans a little more green and is much lighter. It's a Benjamin Moore paint, number 688 for those of you taking notes, Seacliff Heights. It's the perfect amount of clean and refreshing without crossing over into like a tropical tangy aqua. I mean, seriously, when you go to the bathroom in this room, you are like, wow, I feel so good here. I even had a Ragdale colleague take a picture of the bathroom and send it to me so that I could attempt to show you. Granted, the photo washes it out a little bit, but this is how dedicated I am to this color and to bringing it to you. Since experiencing the wonder that is Benjamin Moore Seacliff Heights, I have painted it in 1 bathroom and 2 bedrooms over various apartments that I've lived in since then. I'm telling you, if you are looking for to redecorate a room and want a calming yet refreshing window into color heaven, this is it. We've actually all probably read or heard about how colors of the rooms that we spend time in can affect us in our moods. Green is indeed the most relaxing color to the eye. It encourages unwinding, but is still warm enough to promote comfort and togetherness. Blue is actually said to bring down blood pressure and heart rates. It is also a relaxing and serene color for rooms, but go too light and it can feel chilly. Go too dark, it can actually make you sad. Yellow, on the other hand, is known for being a cheerful and uplifting color, but beware, yellow as the main color in a room can create feelings of frustration and anger. In yellow rooms, people are more likely to lose their tempers, and babies seem to cry more often. No joke, says the internet. Red raises a room's energy level, drawing people in and stimulating conversation, and red rooms can actually raise heart and adrenaline rates and whet people's appetites, making it a good color choice for a dining room. Pink has the soothing effect that can curb aggression and hostility, making it a common choice for holding cells in prisons to help calm inmates. There's even a very specific shade of pink known as drunk tank pink used in prisons. Though, fun fact, some sources did indicate that prolonged time spent in one of these pink rooms can actually increase anxiety and aggression once the initial exposure has sunk in and you've become accustomed to it. Duly noted. This brings us to chapter Purple Mountain's Majesty, naming colors. From Ragdale Blue to Drunk Tank Pink to the Crayola hue Purple Mountain's Majesty, the naming of colors has become like a form of poetry and certainly an entire industry unto itself. Crayola has come up with 120 different colors. Quick side note on a cross-sensory tidbit about crayons. According to a Yale University study, crayons are among the top 20 most recognizable scents to American adults. You can smell them right now, can't you? Yeah. Coffee and peanut butter are numbers 1 and 2, just in case you were wondering. Many crayon names are borrowed from traditional artists' paint names, but most Crayola crayon color names are taken from the U.S. Department's National Bureau of Standards book called Color, Universal Language and Dictionary of Names. The government has a color naming book. This killed a little bit of the magic for me. However, the book, available in full text form through Google Books, hits upon some overarching concerns about how to use and select names for colors so that you can be understood across the vast range of human experiences. I'd like to read you a passage from the introduction. Quote, "Hardly a day goes by without the need for each of us to verbally describe at least one color. The degree to which the other person understands our description depends on a number of factors. Did I use the common language of the street? Are we from the same geographic area? Do we both work in the same trade or occupation? Are we of the same ethnic group? How accurately must the color description be understood?" It gets pretty government-y from there, but these are some interesting considerations to acknowledge. Crayola crayon color names rarely change. However, there are some exceptions. In 1958, Prussian blue was changed to midnight blue in response to Cold War sensitivities and teacher recommendations that children could no longer relate to Prussian history. In 1962, the color flesh was changed to peach, recognizing that not everyone's flesh is the same shade. Go Crayola! I was totally shocked to read that in 1990, Crayola retired 8 colors: maize, raw umber, lemon yellow, blue gray, orange yellow, orange red, blue green, and violet blue. Retired. I mean, it's one thing for colors to go out of vogue, but if Crayola retires certain colors, do the colors still exist? I'm pretty sure there's some sort of conspiracy involved there. In 1993, for the first time, Crayola had a color naming contest and asked consumers to name 16 new colors. This brought us inchworm, jazzberry jam, mango tango, and wild blue yonder. Oh yeah, we got fancy. And in 2000, the company held an online poll to find out America's favorite color. Any guesses? Well, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed, though not surprised, that out of the sea of funky names of colors that have been coined over the years, America's favorite color was blue. 6 other shades of blue did finish in the top 10, including cerulean blue, midnight blue, no longer Prussian blue, aquamarine, periwinkle, denim, and blizzard blue. So at least there's that for Team America's creativity points. Paint companies have also gone all out in their efforts to develop interesting, fun, delicious, and meaningful paint names with emotional connections, especially with the economic downturn of the last few years. Color names are marketing tools, and more paint companies are aiming for language that represents not the color, but your lifestyle. According to one New York Times article that I read, colorists at Valspar meet in vignette rooms that encourage storytelling. Big brainstorming sessions often start with puzzles and other mind stretches to get the color discussions and storytelling going. So we find ourselves with some lovely little bits of color poetry just waiting to be rolled onto our walls. I want to show you a few, but I'm going to tell you the name first, and I want you to try to visualize what you think the color might look like based on the name. So our first one is Gelato in the Park. You got it? Yeah, close, maybe. Anyone have a different name they might like to associate with this? It's cool, you can think about it. Okay. Okay, your next one, ready, is Day at the Jeweler's. There we go. Any thoughts on what we could name this one instead of that? Yeah, okay, I was thinking the same thing. It has that, it pulls from that. It's a little darker, I think. Okay, and your last one, Caffeine Nation. Got it? Any new names for this one, dare I ask? Well, in this spirit, I have brought a selection of paint chips that you may have seen at the back, the same kind of samples that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. I invite you to rename these colors something more meaningful to you. Perhaps the hue reminds you of a favorite spot where you like to curl up with a book in the afternoon when the sunlight comes through the window just so. Or maybe the color harkens a memory of your sister's blonde hair tinted with chlorine after spending a summer at the neighborhood pool. Or perhaps it's a big mismatched red button you sewed on your grandfather's cardigan. Please go to town, write your new color names and associations all over them. I'll be binding this paint chip poetry into an artist book to be part of the Handmade and Bound Festival at Watkins College of Art, Design and Film next week. And I'll invite guests there to add their color names and associations to it as well. I'm pretty much out of time, so this brings me to my final chapter. Chapter Hot Pink, own it. Colors are the touchstones of our daily lives and sensory experiences. They evoke emotions, trigger memories, and can help us make meaning out of the mundane and the magnificent. Whether you're trained in color theory, are a synesthete with involuntary color associations like me, or just need your monsters held at bay each night with your red PJs, I encourage you to take time to notice what you notice what you don't notice, and ask yourself why you select, prefer, or refer to colors in the way that you do. Hot pink is a color that a proud few can pull off. It's not exactly a safe color, but those who do rock hot pink succeed because they just go for it and own it. And that's what I ask for each of us. Love your colors, know your reasons, make them part of your story. Thanks. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, in the back.
So I saw that the O and the Q and the 0 were the same color, and then the 1 and the I were the same color.
Yeah.
Is there other aspects of similar shapes that lead to similar colors?
You know, that's one of the things that I noticed once I finally did this. And I think for a lot of synesthetes, you hear that it's often sound-based, like letters that have a more explosive sound maybe have warmer colors, or I think that happens sometimes for me, like S and Z are like red and orange, and T is a yellow, and that some of the more, the sounds that you create with less exploding consonants in your mouth tend to have that more mellow vocalization, and I think they take on the cooler colors for me. But again, I mean, I was reading through a bunch of books and seeing what other synesthetes had reported for their colors, and it didn't make sense to me. So it's kind of arbitrary, And I guess there are a few letters here and there that in some studies have showed up as being commonly a certain color for synesthetes, but when I read that, I was like, oh, well, mine's not that color, so I don't know. Any other questions? Yeah?
Do different fonts cause different shifts for you?
That's a great question. And I think that gets at kind of the trigger for me. It's not so much when I'm looking at a letter that it like turns that color on the page or something. It's more like the concept of the letter. So in my head, I'm probably not even thinking of a font or a typeface when I'm like processing a word really quickly. So I don't think it plays a part, for me at least. Yeah?
Do events in your life change your color preferences? Dramatic events, good events?
No. They're pretty much what they are, and like, I guess the reason it seems so rare is that a lot of people with synesthesia don't realize that it's like not normal, and they just think everyone must experience color this way or letters this way, and then sometimes they'll mention it and someone will be like, what are you talking about? And so then they won't talk about it again. And so it's either people who like won't come forward because they've had some like negative experience in sharing it, or they just don't even realize it's a thing. So there hasn't been like major comprehensive studies that really can tell us how many people have it. But the thing that has come up is that more children often have it, like a higher percentage of children have it, and not as many adults, especially older adults. So it's a question of whether you're trained out of it as you learn to read and write in school, or it's just hard to say. So for me, I think one of the things that makes me know that I have it is that they don't change over time. And I think that that's pretty, let's acknowledge as being one of the things that defines it. Yeah?
Part two of that question, then when is it formed? Is it something you're born with, or is it something that you, at your impressionable age, you develop through life events?
From the research that I did, it sounds like perhaps a little bit of both. I think one of the theories is that babies actually, before their brains have kind of compartmentalized and been trained to separate sensations, like this is a sound and this is a smell and this is what I'm seeing, they just experience it all as stimuli. And at like 4 months or so, those distinctions begin to occur. And so the theory is that as those like synapses are forming and those separations happen, people with synesthesia, some of those connections remain as opposed to kind of compartmentalizing.